From the moment the laws restricting public bathing were repealed in South Australia in the early 1900s and the people of Adelaide shed their clothes and their inhibitions and took to the sea to bathe, it became clear that there would be a need for a lifeguard service. And thus in the early 1920s, the lifesaving movement started in South Australia. In 1925, South Australia's first lifesaving club was formed at the seaside resort enclave of Henley Beach. At the time, Henley was the only club affiliated with the surf lifesaving clubs of the eastern states. All of the other clubs were affiliated with Royal Lifesaving, and there was a real line in the sand between the two bodies until 1952. By the time this lifesaving carnival was held at Glenelg Beach in the early 1930s, there were lifesaving clubs from Victor Harbour down to Largs Bay, and the March Past event was as spectacular back then as it still is now. This was a day to showcase the movement and to attract new members, and thousands turned up to watch. In the early days, the clubs made do with very little. The surf boats were recycled lifeboats. They would take an absolute pounding in the large waves and were very difficult to steer on the trip back in. The equipment used in surf rescues included ropes that got very heavy when wet and wooden rescue reels that were usually built by someone in the club with very good carpentry skills. Surf skis and rescue boards were made of wood and were difficult to manoeuvre. Resuscitation techniques and tools were rudimentary by today's standards, but tools such as eave rockers were considered cutting edge at the time. The traditional patrol team that is still in operation today was the model of surf lifesaving clubs in the eastern states. The push to affiliate with surf lifesaving and form a state association for SA began in the late 30s. Resistance from Royal Lifesaving and then World War II halted the debate. But in the early 50s, the momentum began to surge.
You'll meet them on any beach right round Australia's 13,000 miles of coastline. Members of the Australian Surf Lifesaving Association.
In 1952, Surf Lifesaving Association of Australia SA State Centre was formed, and the first lifesaving patrol season in SA was carried out by inaugural affiliate clubs Glenelg, Moana, Seacliff, Victor Harbour, Henley, Semaphore, Port Elliot and Brighton. As South Australian lifesaving clubs came into line with national regulations on training and equipment, perhaps the most significant change was the loss of female lifesavers. Women were left to join Royal Lifesaving clubs after being active members in significant numbers up and down the coast. But under the new regime, they were now barred from having any involvement except with the Ladies Auxiliary at surf lifesaving clubs. Surf lifesaving's popularity soared in South Australia during the 1950s and 60s as the rise of family car ownership and new roads opened up access to the coastal lifestyle to more South Australian families than ever before. We can see by the crowds of spectators at this carnival held at Christie's Beach in 1956 how much interest there was in the spectacle of the traditional surf lifesaving carnival. Lifesavers kept themselves duty fit and rescue ready through a range of competitive games such as chariot races, pillow fights, rescue and resuscitation races, belt races, beach sprints, surf ski and surf boat racing.
Swimming is safe at Moana today, all right. On hand are nearly 2,000 lifesavers from all parts of Australia. And club pennants fly proudly in the breeze as they compete in the March Pass.
In 1961, Moana became the first South Australian beach to host the Aussies, as its success saw the event return to Southport in 1967. As the movement continued to grow, Surf Lifesaving SA consolidated itself as an association, moving into the original surf house at Henley Beach Police Station and hiring its first administration staff. Surf Lifesaving SA invested in the future of the movement with the introduction of junior lifesavers.
These are Australia's future surf lifesavers. They're between 5 and 13 years old and they train hard.
South Australia became the first state to run nippers programs in 1968, with 600 boys representing 11 clubs. The first South Australian Nipper Carnival was held at West Beach that year. Nippers have since grown to account for a third of the movement and almost 3,000 members aged from 5 to 13 in the ranks today. The 1970s were boom times for technological innovation in lifesaving, and South Australia led the way. In just 4 short years between 1970 and 74, Surf Lifesaving SA introduced patrol towers, mobile public education units, jet skis, jet boats, even helicopters. VHF radio communication is established between clubs, and the traditional surf reel begins to be replaced by the rescue board, rescue tube and the inflatable rescue boat as primary rescue tools. The Australian Surf Lifesaving Championships, also known as the Aussies, returned to South Australia in 1974, this time at Glenelg. And the association found a new home, Surf House at Westlakes. Declining member numbers towards the end of the decade and the rising women's liberation movement, coupled with the political will of the Dunstan government, saw pressure to reinstate women as active members. And in 1980, SA became the first state in Australia to award women the bronze medallion. The 80s began with a sense of anticipation and optimism. With the influx of women and growing Nipper numbers, membership had reached 3,000. The introduction of commercially developed national surf sports events such as the Coolangatta Gold, Nutrigrain Ironman Series and Uncle Toby Series saw a new breed of superstar surf lifesavers emerge as major athletes and beloved household names. Surf sports in SA reached new heights with state team performances and championships results our best on record. The Aussies returned to Moana in 1982 and 1986, and local crowds shared the Australian love affair with surf sports right through the 1980s. Surf Lifesaving began to develop its brand alongside the expansion of rescue services, and the iconic red and yellow flags were introduced to South Australian beaches. The introduction of the patrol uniform and red and yellow flag swimming areas required Surf Lifesaving to educate the public and influence their behaviour at the beach more than ever before. During the 1990s, the education footprint continued to grow. Surf Lifesaving introduced Surf Ed, school holiday programs, SA Water Vac Swim, youth development camps and a raft of new awards and training manuals. With the uptake of mobile phones, our emergency operations group moved to a 24-hour call-out roster, and our centralised radio room, Surfcom, came online. Professional lifeguards hit the beach for the first time, along with defibrillators, gloves and face shields for resuscitation. Surf Lifesaving SA continues its trajectory of growth in the new millennium. Surf Lifesaving SA moves into Surf House Mark III at Torrensville and becomes a registered training organisation, allowing us to launch the Lifesaving Academy of South Australia, which now trains thousands of members of the public each year in first aid and CPR. Significant work with state government secures the Club Rebuild program, which ensures that our clubs will have serviceable facilities to be able to continue their essential community service for generations to come. As social climates changed around us, the early 2000s focused on inclusion and well-being for our members. Diversity became a priority for us, and our On the Same Wave program is born. Surf Lifesaving SA begins our journey towards activity, seeking increased participation from people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, Indigenous people and people with a range of disabilities and integration challenges. Surf Lifesaving South Australia develops the groundbreaking Nipper Safe program, which is credited as the inspiration for national child protection policies that are now standard in schools and community organisations. In response to climate change and environmental issues affecting our coasts, EcoSurf is developed and we begin teaching our members about environmental stewardship within our patrol areas. Today our clubs are committed to reducing energy consumption, litter and pollution, as well as protecting local animals and vegetation. Throughout the first decade of this century, Surf Lifesaving SA worked incredibly hard to deliver a purpose-built home for the modern state service, and in 2012, Surf Central at West Beach was finally opened. The new facility houses major powercraft, Surfcom, training rooms and offices, and its proximity to the West Beach boat ramp and the helicopter base allows us to be rescue ready 24/7. We continue the South Australian tradition of innovation. In the past 5 years, we have begun surf safety training earlier than ever with the introduction of surf babies and little lifesavers. At the other end of the spectrum, we are engaging with our vibrant senior citizens as they grow in numbers with the Surf Seniors program. Switching our Surfcom network from analogue to digital, coupled with the National Digital Framework, will see us harness the power of information and technology and create smart beaches. Through Surf Sisters, we are encouraging our female members, who now equal the men in numbers, to match the men in leadership and development roles. As well, we are expanding our inclusion programs to the Seashore Swim School, which will offer community open water swimming lessons and provide a pathway to club activities for people who may face barriers participating with us. In 2012, the Lifesaving World Championships were held in Adelaide with great success, and Surf Lifesaving SA is delighted to become the first state body to again host the pinnacle event next year. As we look to the future, we see a changing and challenging landscape, one we are already preparing for, and we know that our mission to save lives and build healthier and safer communities will endure.